For more than 3 decades, Mary Austin kept silent. She turned down interviews, ignored tabloids, and refused to join the endless speculation about Freddie Mercury's final days. While the media filled headlines with theories and invented confessions, she stayed inside Garden Lodge, the home he left her, guarding the one truth only she knew. Now at 73, she has finally broken her silence. Her voice is calm, but weighted by memory. She doesn't speak for attention or to correct the rumors that have followed her since 1991. She speaks because time has passed, and she wants Freddie remembered as the man she knew, not the myth the press created. The truth she reveals isn't scandal or surprise. It's something smaller, deeper, and far more human. It's about love, loyalty, and the final words he whispered before he was gone. As Mary walks through the quiet halls of Garden Lodge, still lined with Freddie's art and photographs, she stops beside the piano where he once sang to her. The world knows his voice, but only she, after all these years, knows what he really said when the music ended. London, 1970. The city was alive with noise and change, rock, rebellion, and fashion spilling from every corner. Inside a small boutique called Biba, a 19-year-old shop assistant named Mary Austin stood behind the counter, unaware that her life was about to shift forever. One afternoon, a young man with sharp features, wild dark hair, and the quiet confidence of someone meant to be seen walked in. His name was Farrokh Bulsara, not yet the Freddie Mercury the world would one day know. He wasn't famous then. He was broke, restless, and chasing a dream that few believed in. He worked at a second-hand clothing stall and spent nights rehearsing with a new band that hadn't yet found its sound. But what struck Mary wasn't his ambition, it was his warmth. He treated her as if she were extraordinary, and for the first time she saw herself through his eyes. Their first dates were simple: cups of tea, long walks through Kensington, and nights spent talking about art and music. Freddie dreamed out loud. Mary listened and believed. Friends later recalled how inseparable they became, often finishing each other's sentences. She gave him stability, something rare in the chaos of London's music scene, and he gave her adventure. By the time Queen was forming, they were living together in a tiny flat near Holland Road. Freddie began writing songs constantly, filling notebooks with lyrics about love and fear. Among them was one he said was for her, "Love of my life." In interviews years later, he admitted she was his greatest muse, saying, "All my lovers asked why they couldn't replace Mary. It's simply impossible." While the press later painted him as larger than life, those who knew Freddie in those early years described him as shy, almost gentle. Mary saw both sides: the dreamer who doubted himself, and the performer who could command a stage. What bound them together wasn't fame or attraction. It was the feeling that somehow they recognized each other before the world ever did. It was a partnership born in obscurity, before money, before headlines, before the man named Freddie Mercury ever existed. By 1975, everything had changed. Bohemian Rhapsody had exploded across Britain, turning Freddie Mercury into a star almost overnight. The small apartments and quiet nights were replaced by endless touring, flashing cameras, and the constant noise of fame. Mary was still by his side, but the world around them no longer belonged to them alone. Queen's rise was staggering. The press followed Freddie everywhere, fascinated by his bold style and unpredictable personality. But behind the glitter and stage lights there was a man growing uneasy with himself. Friends began noticing changes: new company, longer nights, and a private restlessness that fame couldn't quiet. Mary, grounded and intuitive, sensed it before he ever said a word. Their relationship was loving, but cracks had begun to form. Freddie was discovering a side of himself that frightened him. He adored Mary, yet felt drawn elsewhere. In 1976, one evening in their shared flat, he told her the words that would redefine their lives: "I think I'm bisexual." She paused, then quietly replied, "No, Freddie, I think you're gay." It was an act of honesty from both of them, painful but freeing. They ended their romantic relationship soon after, but their bond refused to fade. Freddie bought her a home near his and continued to call her his common-law wife. When the tabloids speculated about new lovers, he reminded friends that Mary was the only person who truly understood him. She remained the calm center in his storm, still attending shows and staying close to the band, even as he moved deeper into a world of excess and experimentation. The media began shaping their own version of Freddie, flamboyant, reckless, unanchored. But behind closed doors, he was still writing songs about Mary, still sending her flowers on her birthday, still asking for her advice when fame felt suffocating. Theirs was no longer a love story in the romantic sense, but something harder to define: friendship mixed with devotion, distance mixed with need. It was as though Freddie had built an entire empire, only to find that the only person who made it feel like home no longer shared his bed. And that quiet truth, that she stayed when everything else changed, became the foundation of everything that followed. Even after their breakup, Mary Austin's presence in Freddie Mercury's life never faded. She was no longer his partner, yet somehow remained his constant. While others came and went, Mary stayed, quietly, without drama or demand. Those who knew Freddie best would later say that she was the one person who could speak to him without fear, who saw the man beneath the spectacle. In the years that followed, Freddie's fame became unstoppable. Queen was selling out stadiums, recording some of the most iconic rock albums ever made, and redefining what a frontman could be. But amid the chaos, Freddie made sure Mary was always close. He moved into a grand home in Kensington, and she was given a house just a short walk away. They spoke nearly every day. When parties filled his world, she often chose not to attend, not because of distance, but because she understood him better in quiet moments. Friends noticed that when Freddie felt overwhelmed, he'd often retreat to Mary's home for tea, conversation, or simply silence. He once told a reporter, "To me, she's my common-law wife, the only friend I trust completely." Those words weren't for performance. They were a reflection of how he lived, extravagant on stage, but deeply loyal in private. Mary saw sides of Freddie that few ever did. The man who doubted himself before every show, the artist obsessed with getting every note perfect, the friend who would laugh uncontrollably over small things, and then fall into moments of stillness that spoke of exhaustion. Through it all, their bond evolved into something unspoken, a love built not on desire but on understanding. When Freddie began surrounding himself with new friends and lovers, Mary didn't compete. She simply remained part of his daily life, part of his emotional landscape. She became his quiet home base, the one place where he didn't have to be Freddie Mercury. He could just be the man she'd met years before at Biba. The world saw a rock icon. Mary saw the human being who still called her every night to say goodnight. And for Freddie, that small ritual, that voice on the other end of the line, was the one thing that never changed, no matter how loud the world became. By the early 1980s, Freddie Mercury was one of the most recognizable performers on the planet. The larger his fame grew, the more he seemed to hide behind it. Queen was performing to sold-out crowds around the world, but away from the stage, Freddie's world was shifting. The parties grew louder, the nights longer, and the headlines more invasive. Yet behind the laughter and extravagance, Mary Austin saw the fatigue that few others noticed. The tabloids painted him as unstoppable, but Freddie was beginning to show cracks. He had become a prisoner of his own legend, adored everywhere, known by no one. When the AIDS crisis began spreading fear across the music world, rumors and whispers followed him. Still, Mary stayed close, aware that something was changing in him. He began withdrawing from public life, canceling appearances, and avoiding interviews. Friends described how the once vibrant Freddie became quieter, more reflective. Mary was often the one who answered calls, who managed visits, who shielded him from unwanted attention. The media continued to chase stories, speculating about his health, his partners, his future. But inside Garden Lodge, the atmosphere was one of quiet care. Freddie didn't deny the illness, he simply chose privacy. He still recorded music, including The Show Must Go On, a song that would later sound like a farewell, but his focus shifted toward peace. He surrounded himself with art, cats, and the few people he trusted, Mary among them. She wasn't there for fame or obligation. She was there because she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Those who visited said her presence calmed him. She handled his correspondence, managed small details, and kept the house serene. The chaos of the outside world couldn't touch what existed between them. As the illness progressed, Freddie stopped fighting the truth. He had lived boldly, loved deeply, and made peace with the inevitable. Mary never asked questions he didn't want to answer. She simply stayed, the same way she always had. In those years, the world saw a fading rock star. Mary saw a man who still smiled when she entered the room. The man she met in 1970, still there beneath the pain, still calling her my old faithful. By the summer of 1991, Freddie Mercury knew his time was running short. Garden Lodge had become his sanctuary, its high brick walls and heavy green gates shielding him from the noise outside. Inside, he filled the rooms with paintings, flowers, and soft music, creating beauty in the face of decline. Only a small circle of friends was allowed in, and at the center of that circle was Mary Austin. Reporters waited on the street daily, convinced a headline was imminent. Yet behind those gates, life continued with quiet dignity. Freddie refused self-pity. He still joked with staff, still played music, still worked on Queen's final recordings. His strength astonished everyone who saw him. Mary visited constantly, often bringing small gifts, candles, notes, his favorite lilies. She helped organize the house, made sure meals were prepared, and protected his privacy when journalists tried to breach the walls. Visitors later described those final months as peaceful. Freddie spent hours near his piano, listening to old records, sketching ideas, and reminiscing with Mary about their early days. Sometimes they would sit in silence, sharing memories only they understood. The bond that began 2 decades earlier had come full circle. She was again the calm presence in his storm. In November, his condition worsened. Mary was among the last people to see him conscious. She later said his words were gentle, filled with gratitude. He thanked her for being there, for never leaving, for keeping him grounded when the world turned chaotic. She didn't ask for details about his illness or his regrets. She only listened. That moment, quiet and unrecorded, was theirs alone. Freddie passed away on November 24, 1991. Outside, crowds gathered in grief, candles flickering beneath a gray London sky. Inside, Mary helped ensure that everything he wished for was done. His dignity preserved, his home undisturbed. The media called it the end of an era. For Mary, it was the loss of the only person who had ever made her feel seen. The man who once filled stadiums left this world with only a few people by his side. But among them, as always, was the woman who never walked away. When Freddie Mercury's will was read in early 1992, many were stunned. The majority of his estate, including Garden Lodge, his possessions, and a significant share of his royalties, was left to Mary Austin. The press speculated endlessly, questioning why he had not divided his fortune among his bandmates or later companions. But those who truly knew him understood immediately. Freddie had made his choice years earlier. He once said, "If things had been different, Mary would have been my wife. Everything I have belongs to her." The inheritance was not about money, it was about trust. With that trust came a request few people ever knew about. Freddie had asked Mary to handle his final resting place, to ensure his ashes were scattered privately. without the world turning it into a spectacle. For years after his death, rumors circulated in newspapers and magazines. Some said she had taken them to Lake Geneva. Others claimed she buried them in his garden. Mary never confirmed or denied a single story. What she did say was simple: Freddie wanted peace, and she intended to give it to him. Even those closest to Queen admitted they were never told where he was laid to rest. She kept that promise as sacred, refusing to discuss it even decades later. "He wanted it to remain between us," she said in one of her few interviews, "and that's exactly how it will stay." The responsibility weighed heavily. She had not only lost the person she loved most, but had become the guardian of his legacy. Every item in Garden Lodge, his art, his letters, his music, became a part of that duty. She turned down offers from museums and collectors, keeping his belongings as he left them. The media tried to frame her as reclusive or controlling, but those who visited saw something else: loyalty. The same loyalty that began in 1970 had carried on long after the applause ended. While the world mourned a legend, Mary quietly kept her word. Freddie's voice may have filled the world, but the silence Mary maintained afterward became its own kind of devotion. After Freddie Mercury's death, Mary Austin retreated from public life. The cameras lingered outside Garden Lodge for months, waiting for a glimpse of her. She never stepped forward. When the crowds faded, she closed the gates and continued the life Freddie had trusted her to protect. Inside, the house remained almost untouched. The same furniture, the same photos, the same piano where he once composed "Love of My Life." Through the 90s and early 2000s, the world's fascination with Freddie only deepened. Documentaries, biographies, and films reimagined his story, yet Mary rarely spoke. She rejected invitations to appear in television specials or magazine features. When she did give a brief statement, it was measured and respectful. "Some things belong to the world," she said, "but some things should stay where he left them." Visitors described Garden Lodge as both beautiful and haunting. Walls covered with paintings Freddie had collected. Rooms filled with flowers she placed fresh each week. The air of silence was deliberate, a space frozen in time, untouched by fame. She raised her two sons nearby, but avoided using Freddie's name to advance her own life. For her, his legacy was never a possession to display. It was a promise to honor. Occasionally, she would attend events marking Queen anniversaries or tributes, standing quietly among fans who saw her as the keeper of his memory. She never claimed that title. When asked why she remained in the house, she explained that leaving felt impossible. "It's where he is," she said. In her 70s, Mary remains private. Neighbors say she still walks the garden Freddie designed, still listens to music drifting through the open windows. Her decision to speak now, after decades of silence, wasn't driven by attention. It was to remind the world that Freddie Mercury's greatest story wasn't about fame or controversy, it was about loyalty. The truth she finally revealed was not a hidden scandal or confession. It was that love in its truest form doesn't vanish. It endures quietly, through years, through loss, through every headline. And though the world has moved on, Mary Austin still keeps her promise, one she made to him and never broke. Today, at 73, Mary Austin still lives behind the tall brick walls of Garden Lodge. Time has softened the noise around her, but not the memory of the man she loved. Visitors describe the house as unchanged. Freddie's piano polished, his artwork perfectly arranged, his presence felt in every room. She once said the home is both a gift and a burden, a reminder that love can last longer than a lifetime. What she has finally revealed is not a secret kept from the world, but the truth of what bound them together. Freddie Mercury left her more than possessions. He left her his trust, and she carried it exactly as he asked. Quietly, faithfully, without needing recognition. The tabloids wrote stories. The films created versions. But Mary never corrected them. She understood that the man she knew didn't belong to the world anymore. He belonged to memory. Her final truth is simple. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a promise whispered once, kept forever. Freddie Mercury's legend belongs to music, but his peace, his final wish, belongs to her. For more emotional stories, check out this video.